Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tuesday, Tanya. We're actually going to be finishing chapter 2 this week and beginning chapter 3. Our learning is in honor of Shira Bashifra Rosa, Eliza Bashifra Rosa, and Yochanan Zashahalevi ben Shifra Rosa. Okie doke. So I want to pick up really quickly because there's a lot to get through where we left off last week, and we had been speaking about the godly soul in 2 previous lessons. One, we focused on the analogy of breath, and the other one we focused on the analogy of conception, and we spoke about the development of the fetus. Actually, some of the more esoteric aspect of conception, where the divine light is in the consciousness, that's where the origin of our procreative ability or partnership with God comes from. And then we also spoke about the analogy of how fetus develops and a soul's journey through the spiritual worlds until it is enclosed or embodied in a physical vessel, which is the body. And we then concluded with a discussion about a relationship with the righteous in the generation, right? I'm just going to review that very, very briefly over here. We said that, here we go, we can understand the teaching of our sages, that you must cleave to God. And how was that? How do you actually do that? It has to be dveika b'talmidei chachamim. You have to cleave to the sages and those who are learned, because we've traveled down through these generations, through the different levels of the worlds. And as we have intergenerationally levels, so too we have intergenerationally. And the sages are like the eyes of the generation, or the idea of a Rebbe is an acronym for Rosh B'nai Yisrael, the head of the people of Israel. So these individuals who are not, their souls are not exiled in the same way ours are, offer us the capacity to travel back up. Well, actually, you can find in the method, there's a course called Open Shut. There's Open Shut 1 and Open Shut 2. Those are in the a la carte menu. And one of the things that we discussed there is that the injunction Lech Lecho, literally it means go to yourself, but that was the instruction that God gave Abraham. Go out from your country and your birthplace and your home, your family's home, to the land that I'll show you. Hasidus, the mystics, explain this as being first a commandment that is given to the soul. Go out on your journey, from the supernal heavenly source, to the land that I'll show you, which is going to be this physical world. But as soon as we arrive in this physical world and we're enclosed in the body, it's called mishcha dechivya, the skin of a snake. And we'll speak about the body in many different ways. In some way it's a temple that houses the soul, and in the other it's like a limitation on the soul. So it has both aspects to it, but as soon as we come into this world, we are then told, Lech lecha me'artzecha. Now you have to take a different journey from the earth heavenward. And that is very difficult to do. And that's really what most of our work in this life is about, to refine ourselves in the service of God and to emerge from our own exiles. And if we want to do that, we have to attach ourselves to the sages of the generations. And then we ended with this teaching about the Poshim Umardim B'Talmidei Chachamim. What happens when you're speaking about those who rebel against the sages of the generation, something that is so prevalent. It's not just in the Jewish world. There's definitely a sense of, I think, more exaggerated of late, of younger people not receiving, not believing that there's a repository of wisdom with their elders. This is not just about one's elders, and I guess there's always been that sense of, you read the Sodoros, like the descent of the generations, as the Gemara, the Talmud says, if one generation are like angels, the next are like people, and if they are like people, the next are like donkeys. So from one generation to two further, that is going to be like from angels to donkeys. Quite astonishing, right? But we're not even talking here about attaching to one's parents, respecting the parents, receiving from the elderlies, but from the sages of the generations, those people who do that, they're still getting their sustenance at some level through the sages. It's just that it comes to them, as we're told, back to back. Very fascinating teaching. It reminds me of in the Zohar that, you see, this idea of achar, the back, is also so much of our work. We always want to be face to face. The Zohar says when a couple gets married, they are achar ba'achar, back to back. But they think they're getting married panim b'panim, face to face. But the truth is they are back to back. That's how the beginning of marriage flows. That's how it rolls. And then so much of the work is connected with the Nasira, the cutting, like the severing of the distinction that is created between Adam and Eve in the biblical Garden of Eden. And then once they're separate, they can turn around and face each other. The individuation that has to happen. But this idea of achar ba'achar, back to back, is something that is in so many of our relationships. And we don't want to receive our sustenance from those levels. We would like to receive them face to face, where there's a level of intimacy where you can make eye contact with someone. Completely different experience of receiving than if someone throws to you over their shoulder. All right, so what I would like to do now is read this last part. The Alter Rebbe is quoting the Zohar and the Zohar Chodesh, and he speaks about intimacy, because one of the things that he has been saying, right, why was he speaking about these righteous individuals, is to acknowledge the fact that there are differences. There are differences in consciousness, in stature, in how exiled or free individuals are within a generation and between generations, the earlier generations down to ours. So clearly there are distinctions, but he has told us, despite those distinctions, we have to know that every soul is connected in the source, the supernal wisdom. This was it, that despite all of these differences, right, the soul is still going to be connected up on high, and it is rooted in Chochmah Eloah, right? It has that root. It comes from God. You are God's child. So now what the Rebbe wants to say is that the Zohar appears from the side to contradict this, because it speaks about the impact of the relationship of the parents during intimacy on the soul of the child. So this seems to contradict what we have been saying, which is, in this world there are distinctions between the souls and how conscious they are of their source. But we all have one Father, we all have one source, and there's no differentiation between us. So how could we say that the relationship, the manner in which the husband and wife conduct themselves during intimacy is going to impact the child? And I will speak about that a little bit. That is not our topic here, but I will address a little bit of what that actually means, or what the desired manner of intimate interaction between a husband and a wife is. All right, so, and what, as regarding what it says in the Zohar and the Zohar Chodesh, she'ikr toli she'kadesh atzmai b'shash tashmish dafka. The main thing is, when we're speaking about the influence on the child, that the person or the soul of this child, is that a couple should sanctify themselves, b'shas tashmish, at the time of sexual intimacy, precisely, specifically at that time. And this is not the case when it comes to those who are ignorant. They're not schooled. They don't necessarily know the texts, or maybe a person who is less refined, etc. Right? What is being said over here? Hainu. That is to say, mishum she'ein lecho nefesh ruach neshama. Why would the Zohar Chodesh tell us that there is this great importance at the time of conception of the child? That really seems to imply that there's going to be a difference between the levels of the soul, meaning the source of the soul, not as the soul came down in this world. So he says, well, the reason that it's so important is because you have no soul, no nefesh, the vital soul, the ruach, the spirit, or the neshama, the soul, she'ein lo levush, that does not have a garment, minefesh da'atzmus aviv ve'imai, that does not have a garment from the vital soul of the essence of the father or the mother. And the whole ha-mitzvah she'oiseh, and all the mitzvahs that this person does, hakal al yedei oiseh halavush, all of it happens through that garment. So this is really dense content. Let's unpack it a little bit. When we talk about the development of a person, I mean, today, I think there's a lot of emphasis placed on intellectual development and possibly extracurricular. You know, you look at what college campuses are looking at. The most important is going to be academic achievement, and then they want to see what's your extracurricular, and then, you know, a set of vague criteria about personality, whether you're likable or you seem to be a person that has integrity, etc. So there is, you know, there's talk of, you want your child to have a certain lifestyle, so to do that, they're going to have to have a great job, and to have the great job, they'll have to go to a specific university. To get into that university, they need to graduate from such and such a high school, and to get into that high school, they'd have to have gone to XYZ lower school, or I don't know what they're called, and we used to call it primary school in South Africa. And then to get into that school, they'd have to go to a kindergarten that is of exceptional quality. And that is why, in truth, you have women a couple of years before they become pregnant, 3 years or so, putting themselves on a waiting list, because there's 6 years waiting list for a preschool when the child is going to be 3 years old or something like that. Quite a remarkable way of thinking about the development of your child. But I mention it as an analogy because of the importance of other factors on the development of that child. So one of those is the pregnancy. mothers who are, it's not just the birth. I was listening to lectures by Winnicott, quite a remarkable therapist who developed attachment theory. And his teachings, it just seems kind of old world, you know. He's speaking about the importance of a mother being with her child and bonding with the child. And then he says, well, you know, the father is also important. It's not like he's not there. He should protect her so that she, you know, take care of things so that the only thing she really has to focus on right at the beginning is her bond with the child. It's kind of gone by the way in recent times. In Brooklyn, there's a daycare center that offers 24/7 service. I mean, I don't imagine you could leave a child there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That would just be like giving them to an orphanage. But at some level, we do that, right? It's like, okay, well, you know, women can have men's work. We've been promoted to that. Well, who's going to do, quote unquote, the woman's work? The government. We give that to them. But therapists have long understood the importance of the bond of a child with the mother. Torah understands it in an even deeper way, that it's not even only, which of course I'm not dismissing, birth and onwards, but the time of the pregnancy. So we are cautioned to watch what we watch or come into contact with the way our emotions fluctuate during pregnancy, etc. Be particularly careful with what you eat, because your food becomes your blood, and the blood becomes the body of the child. That's how you are building and growing this child inside of you. And just as that is important, so too is the intimate act important, and I'll come back to that. But even prior to that, we are told, Rabbi Yaakov Emden in his Siddur comments on this, and in Reishis Chochmah, there are discussions in various places. Think about the food that you eat, or be cognizant of the fact that if you're going to eat a large meal, that meal, to digest the meal takes energy from the body. If you'll be intimate immediately after eating a meal, particularly one that is difficult to digest, that takes energy away from the body's production of the sperm and would influence the child. Or certain kinds of food are going to create or predispose a person to particular kinds of attributes. So this is not a class on how to conduct oneself prior to conception, during intimacy, and during pregnancy. There's much to be said about that. I'm just putting this teaching from the Zohar and the Zohar Chodesh in context. So, for example, we are encouraged to be together, a husband and wife, when it's dark, because a woman should not feel embarrassed of her body, particularly as she ages, etc. The Maharal says it's an act that uses all the senses. It's like almost overwhelming. Food doesn't come as close, but there's smell, and there's taste, and there's touch, and there's hearing. This is quiet in the sense of sight, because it could overwhelm the others. So there are all of these kinds of teachings and insights that are brought. And the discussion over there is that the way a couple conduct themselves during intimacy is going to affect the garment of that soul. So you see this word that is used here, the idea of a garment. Now think about it. It's something that we'll come to in greater depth in chapter 4, and then there are other chapters later that discuss this. But the idea of a garment is something that you could take off. Even in the analogy of mishcha dechivya, the skin of a snake, a snake sheds its skin almost like someone would take off a garment. The idea there that is suggested is of leaving the physical realm. So at some point the soul sheds the body. Certainly on a daily basis we change our clothes, even from day to night. So the idea that the soul has a garment is speaking about the fact that these are attributes that can be changed, similar to the way that you change your clothes. So there's some things that are more essential, difficult to change, but there's certain things that are close to our inner essential being, but not essential in and of themselves, extrinsic. And of course there are levels. I mean, your clothes are not the same as your body. And even in your clothing, you have outer clothing and inner clothing. There could be a coat and a sweater and a shirt and an undershirt, etc. So there are layers, and this is subtle, but we're speaking here about the fact that the garments of the soul of the child are impacted by the way the couple conducts themselves during intimacy. Not the soul, but the garments of the soul. A very big difference. The Rebbe's point is that the soul itself comes from God, but the garments of the soul are impacted by the conduct of the husband and wife during intimacy. And he says, don't underestimate that there is this garment, because he tells us all the deeds, the good deeds, the commandments that you fulfill in this world, in your lifetime, everything happens through that garment. So there's actually 3 garments we are taught, but we could put it in a general sense to this garment that you receive, meaning there are aspects of your personality, the way you interface with the world has been impacted by the way your mother and father were together during intimacy. And so your engagement with the world happens through Eisoi Halavush, through that garment. Even the benevolence that they give, the flow that comes to that person from heaven, all of it happens through this garment. So don't think, oh, it's just a garment, it's irrelevant. It's something that is extremely relevant. And if you will sanctify yourself, or this hypothetical person, if this person will sanctify themselves, Yamshich Levush Kadosh, they will draw down a holy garment, Lenishmas Benoi, for the soul of their child. Vafilu he neshama gedola, and even if it is a great soul. Remember what we said, the great soul is not speaking about the root of the soul, it is speaking about the level of concealment that has happened. Just as when we spoke about the nails being formed from that original conception of the sperm and the egg, right? That it moves down and down. It's like limitations. As it's manifesting, the original light is being limited. So too, when we speak about a great soul or a lower soul. But here he says, even if it is a great soul, that soul requires, it needs the sanctification of the Father. You'll notice that it speaks specifically about the father and not so much the mother. You may be interested to read, I think I have it available as a PDF on the site, the book of Esther. That, in that book, oh no, it's not the book of Esther, it's the book of Ruth. In the book of Ruth, what we are, one of the things that I explore there is biblical stories, or throughout Tanakh, that were complex, that were apparently confusing around sexuality, particularly in the lineage of Mashiach. And one of the things that I learned from my teacher, Rebbetzin Heller, and the book is written based on her teachings, is that when we speak about, I'm sorry. All right, so one needs the sanctification of the Father. I was telling you about Rebbetzin Hiller's book, and she says there, in all of these mysterious stories, you can read about them. It's the story of Yehuda and Tamar, and David and Bathsheba, and Ruth and Boaz, and Yishai, etc. All these different stories, and Netzeves, his wife, all these stories, what's seemingly strange about them is that the men didn't know exactly what was going on. Either they didn't know whom they were with, or they weren't sure about whether they should be with that person. And it was the woman who had initiated and instigated it. And one of the things that Rebbetzin Heller says is that the woman is receiving. She receives the seed of her husband. He is the one who is influencing, and that's the word that we have, yamshich. This word is he will draw down. Yamshich levush kadosh. The fact that he is active and she is passive is significant in it is significant in terms of his consciousness. The more he's aware of, the less of a pure open vessel he could actually be. That's in the context of the book of Ruth. Here, what we're saying is a little bit different, but connected to the same idea, which is that through the consciousness of the Father, he's going to draw down this garment. The mother is going to open herself and receive and welcome that soul. But there is a causative effect that happens through the consciousness of the Father particularly. And in general, the way that the couple conducts themselves is going to also, it's like a loop, right? You have consciousness affects action, and then action affects consciousness. So the couple together are feeding off of each other. The sanctity with which one conducts oneself is also going to impact consciousness, which is then going to impact the nature of the interaction. So the Father is going to draw down a soul for the child, and even if this child is a very lofty soul, it needs the sanctification of the Father. And this is the main thing that we are concluding with. But the soul itself, sometimes nishmas adam gvayela ein kates, the soul of an inestimably great person, comes down to be the son of a person who's very low and maybe not respected. As the Arizal wrote, Kol ze b'likutei Torah, he wrote about all of this in his book, Likutei Torah, on the Torah portion of Vayera, or the Taimei Mitzvahs, and his book. It's the reasons, the deeper esoteric reasons for all of the commandments, Parshas Bereshis. All right, so I think that before we go on to chapter 3 and the introduction, there's a lot that was said there. I want to open up for questions. All right, so the question was asked. There seems to be a little bit of a contradiction, because on the one hand I said the male is active, but I also implied that Boaz and the others were passive. Yeah, that's why I said it's a little bit of a different angle. What I was saying, the main point is that what's common to both of those positions is that the consciousness of the Father is impactful. More so than that, of the mother. I'm not saying the mother's consciousness the mother's consciousness can set up the dynamic. She's going to awaken within her husband a particular kind of awareness. Look, the main thing when a couple is intimate, we're not speaking about tzaddikim, about the righteous, is that they will love each other. Just being aware of that is already a very lofty conception. But coming back to this question, the general principle is the father is active. He is the one who draws down, and the wife is the one who receives. That is the reason why, when it came to the lineage of Mashiach, the husband, the father in each of those cases was not aware, or at least fully aware, of what was going on. Because the soul of Mashiach is so lofty that it was impossible to be a repository for the soul to come into the world. You know, there's certain things that are just so beyond us, we're not capable of doing that. And so it had to be hidden, because no amount of meditation or intention or awareness, consciousness could actually be mamshech, draw down the soul of Mashiach. So it's precisely because of what we're talking about over here, which is that the father is mamshech, levush, a holy garment. He's the one who's going to draw the holy garment down for the child. It's precisely because of that when it came to the soul of Mashiach, he could not be conscious. So I hope that explains it. The soul of Mashiach is unique. One of the ways of explaining it is that there's so much light there that the stories had to be surrounded in disrepute or confusion, things that seem to be inappropriate, in order to confuse the Satan. You know, that there would have been, if you openly proclaim something for what it is, then, oh gosh, you know, like there's going to be so much that attacks that holiness. So here it was hidden. So, you know, Yehuda, it's a relationship with his own daughter-in-law, and he took her for a woman who was, you know, for hire. That's like, what? How could a person do that? And with Ruth, there was such a question, because the Moabites were known for two things in particular. They were extremely cruel, and they were very modest. And so we were told that we couldn't marry a Moabitess, a convert. And the question came up, you know, look, Moses, you know, what about you? And with Ruth, she was a convert from Moab. So Boaz was like really confused about it, you know. And David was the child of a suspected affair. So what was going to happen with him? I mean, you should get the book. It's just fascinating. I think that we have it online. Otherwise, you can contact the office. We have hardcover copies as well. It was really fascinating working on that book. But it's because of that. It had to be hidden, because there was so much sanctity, and also because a person could never have the capacity to draw down that soul. I think that what is analogous to this is saying, when we left Egypt, we counted for 49 days, but actually Shavuot, the festival of the giving of the Torah, is on the 50th day after the Exodus. So why did we not count 50 days? And the answer is, we don't have the capacity to count 50 days. That we have the capacity to do 49, one after the other. Just keep on counting. And once that happens, then God gives us the 50th, but we couldn't actually do it. So too, when you speak about the lineage of Mashiach, this drawing down of the soul, it's something that those truly righteous, lofty, rare souls could prepare themselves to do. But in terms of the act of intimacy, we're not capable of bringing that soul down. All right, so I think, folks, that in general, I'm actually going to bring this class to a 45-minute segment, because it seems to work in terms of the thought balloons, the containers in the chapters of Tanya. At this point, anyone else have another question? And we'll leave, if not, we'll leave it at this until we continue. I would like to start chapter 3 in another recording session. Anyone who wants to ask one more question before we go? All right, folks. Well, thank you to Shifa Rosa and her husband for sponsoring the class in honor of their children. And thank you all who are on the call today for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you next week. God bless.